We've got a very pleasant late summer afternoon here in Delaware County, New York. We're in the Catskill Mountains, which is about 150 miles northwest of New York City at this location, and at the Little Pond campground here. My goal today is to bark up some relic trees or relic forests. The top of the mountain that you see in the background there, Cabot Mountain, C-A-B-O-T, is got several hundred acres of forest that was never logged, and has trees that have been there, you know, in a sustained manner for hundreds of years. And that's true of many of the mountaintops in this area. The loggers and the farmers never quite got to the top of these mountains before a lot of it was purchased and put into conservation, was conserved to protect the watersheds for the reservoirs of New York City about the early 1900s. So it's not uncommon to find first growth forest or relict forest in this area. What we're going to do today is about a 5-mile hike. We can cut it shorter if time runs out. I've got about 6 hours of good daylight here. I'm at the P at the center of the screen there at the Little Pond campground. We've got Touch Me Not Mountain on the east side of the lake. It's a steeper climb. I'm going to do that on the way up. At the top of that, there's an area I've got circled in black that's reported to have first growth forest from a reliable source. So we're going to assume that's correct information. I'm positive it is, and explore those acreage. And then there's a larger area to the west of that on Cabot Mountain that also has first growth, and it covers the entire top of that mountain, which has almost a 3,000 foot elevation. And I've been in this area for a few days. I've actually seen some first growth forest on what's called the Dry Brook Ridge, right here in the center of the screen, and also on what's called Balsam Mountain, about 20 miles east of here. So I've been around it for a few days, but I wanted to record it today, and we'll go up there and see what we can find. And before we look at the relict forest or first growth forest on the top of Touch Me Not Mountain and Cabot Mountains, let's look at some even-aged forest that's of second or third generation. It's probably been logged or possibly even pastured or farmed at one time, but this has been in public ownership for quite a while. So these trees have had a chance to reach full height. So the height of the trees doesn't determine if we're in a relict forest or a first growth forest. These trees have had plenty of time to get to their full potential as far as their height goes. Most of them aren't that large in diameter, maybe a foot or a foot and a half. Got a couple larger cherry trees in the neighborhood here. This black cherry back here is probably almost 2 feet in diameter. And again, it's reached its full height, but I can't see it, the top of it, because of the beech trees and sugar maples coming up underneath it. So this is what we have in here, is often called northern hardwoods. We've got sugar maple, yellow birch, cherry, American beech, and some red maple. We've also got quite a bit of northern red oak on this south-facing mountainside. And northern red oak is a plant that often grows in earlier stages of succession in these mountains. But as the forest matures, it often drops out. So our northern red oak has these furrows and ridges that almost look like ski trails coming down the bark. Let's keep that in mind as we continue on this hike. And we're still on the lower slopes of Touch Me Not Mountain. And here we got a 2-foot diameter red oak tree here, northern red oak. And it reaches to the sky and branches out in all directions. And often the northern red oak is found in areas that had been cleared and are now going back to forest. But if you notice, the younger trees underneath it are not northern red oak. They're all American beech at this point, and probably some maples if we look around a little longer. But there's one, the fact that I'm finding oaks and a white ash over here. These are both indicator species of land that is not old growth or first growth or relic forest. This ash is about 1.5 feet in diameter, and yes, it's diseased from the emerald ash borer. A lot of them in this area are. And I don't know if there's anywhere that the ashes are going to be unaffected by that. Seems to be creeping up on every stand that I've ever hiked on in the last 10 years. One way we can know for sure this was not first growth forest or relic forest, if there was any doubt, these are actually fairly large trees in diameter. They're not huge, but they're large. You know, we got real stony ground here. This was probably never used for row crops, but it could be pastured. And one way to get rid of some of the extra rocks is to build walls, and one way to mark off boundaries and contain livestock is to build walls. So in the Catskill Mountains here, and in much of New England and even northeast Pennsylvania, you find these stone walls just about everywhere. And if you see a stone wall, pretty good chance the area was cleared at one time, even if it was a long time ago. And we'll continue climbing up Touch-Me-Not Mountain. We're seeing a lot more northern red oak on this steeper slope. And let's just take a quick look. Mother Nature made it real easy to review northern red oak leaves and acorns. Had a lot of wind this morning, and I think some blew down in the last few hours. They haven't even been stepped on yet. So, there's your red oak leaf. And this information's all available on this channel, with notches that come part way down into the leaf, but not all the way down close to the mid vein like a scarlet oak or a pin oak. And our acorns need to get in the shade. There we go. Now we can see them better. I always considered northern red oak as having the large acorn with the small, neatly knit cap. It almost looks like a beret that a person would wear. And these particular trees are living up to their name. They got the red bottom of the stem or petiole there. And our evenly furrowed bark with lots of ridges and furrows that almost zigzag their way down, especially at the bottom. And after following this blue marked trail with the blue discs on it from the campground and picnic area at Little Pond Campground, Little Pond State Park, come a little over a mile to the junction with what's called the Touch-Me-Not Trail, which actually runs the whole length of this ridge, including the north end of Touch-Me-Not Mountain. And when these two trails meet, to the north of this area is where we could start finding some evidence of relic forest. So I'll be on the lookout for it. Again, these trees this entire hike have reached pretty much their full height. So it's more a question of other things to look for. Size of the trees and evidence that they've been around a long time, which I'll point out when we get to it. But it's not always the height or even the diameter of the tree that gives you an idea if it's a relic forest or not. And often these areas with large rock fields and boulders were hard to log or hard to pasture. And that may have been what preserved this north end of this Touch-Me-Not Mountain. I had to go about a 10-minute easy off-trail hike to the north of the Touch-Me-Not Trail to start seeing some trees that made it obvious this was a relic forest. And here's a black cherry, which the cherries are ripe and littering the ground. I've been snacking on them all afternoon. So the windy day here is causing them to fall. This guy is tall, and he's probably 3 feet around. Let's pause 1 second. Let's measure him. And I believe I have my hiking pole set for 42 inches, folks. So you can see, even from this fair distance away, that it's almost that large of a tree. Another thing I'm looking at around here is some of these skeletons of black cherries are just as large. Let's pause for a second and look at those. And the handsome reddish purplish color of the heartwood of a black cherry tree, which makes it great for furniture making and a handsome appearance for woodworking, is present even in these dead trees. Doesn't really lose its color. I'm fairly certain this is a black cherry that is deceased. As a matter of fact, I've got some bark on the ground to prove that. So that bark has that potato chip type appearance. The flakes come off in about the size of a potato chip. And there's also a couple more right behind this large boulder here. And we've got a couple more large black cherries that have deceased. So I'm looking at the size of the trees right now. We'll look at some other factors that could help give us a clue as to whether this is a relict forest. And just a couple hundred yards from those large black cherry trees, and this is a lot of black cherry on this ridge. Some of them aren't that large, but it's dominant here, even more than the maples. But we also have a very large yellow birch, and they do have that peeling bark. And as the trees get older, the peeling bark gives way to what looks like little plates. Let's zoom in. And sometimes the peeling is actually only visible on the upper part of the tree as the tree gets really large. So not a lot of yellow birch that's large on this particular part of this ledge, but we'll be on the lookout for it. I'm going to concentrate the rest of my afternoon on Cabot Mountain. The trail actually goes right through that first growth or relic forest, so we can continue on in that area and study that area in greater detail than this one. This one is off trail. I didn't want to spend a lot of time back here because my time for the afternoon is limited, and that is in a larger area. We can get a bigger sample size of what to really look for in these mountains. And we'll continue our ascent of Cabot Mountain in search of the relict forests. And I've got on my map here, after the junction with the campground trail, it was fairly level and just started going up very gently. This land is gently sloped, and the road up from the campground is an old road that serviced this area when it was farmland. So these white ash trees, like the one I just showed in the last clip and this one here, indicate that this was once farmland. Probably pasture, maybe some crops if it wasn't too stony. And just to my west, I'm going to turn around here. The trail begins a very steep ascent up a very rocky area with thick bedrock ledges. That coincides with my current location on the map. Where the T in touch me not is there, and I've got a pointer there with a little twig, is about where this first growth or relic forest is supposed to begin. Often these ledges are the demarcation between land that was logged or used for agricultural use and land that was just too difficult to get to with the technology that existed at the time. Much of the land that is in forest preserve now was bought around the turn of the around 1900 to help preserve the forests that ensured a steady water supply to New York City. So eventually they probably could have got to this land up here, but they hadn't at the point at which it became owned by the state of New York. Well, after ascending 300 or 400 feet in elevation over about a quarter mile's distance, we've made it through the steepest of this rock garden. But these ledges continued for quite a distance. Make it very difficult for anybody to log or farm this land. Now, it doesn't mean it couldn't have burned during a forest fire, but there's no evidence of that in the tree species here. I just did a clip a minute ago where I didn't talk of a large black cherry, and here's a large yellow birch in the foreground here. These yellow birches, they kind of lose their peeling appearance and get more blocks and chunks as they get older. So that's often something we're looking for in the yellow birches, not just the size, but how the bark changes from a smooth bark with peels to a chunky bark, where the peels are only visible on the upper branches, which go off in all directions. They're hard to see in this video, but this guy's going off for many, many feet once it reaches the top of its, what is called the bowl, or the clear stretch of wood. So that's another thing we're looking at for trying to determine if it's a relic forest, is not just how big this yellow birch is, but how much it does when it gets to the top and how far it's reached out. And that's often how you can start making that determination. So I think we're into what's being mapped as relic forest here on the east slope of Cabot Mountain. Let's keep looking around and see what else there is to see. And as we continue along, again, we've lost all the ash. There wasn't much northern red oak on this stretch of trail, but there was a lot of white ash till we got to the bottom of those cliffs. Scrambled up through those cracks, and now we're getting into what's called the Climax forest for this particular location. We're about 3,000 feet up, 42 degrees north latitude here in Delaware County, New York. So our Climax forest would be red and sugar maple. Lots of these black cherries up here. And yellow birch, but you would not expect to find paper or gray birch in a Climax or relic forest. Here's another real large yellow birch, again with those branches going all over the place. That's one thing they look at when they try to make that determination, whether this forest is just old trees or actually a relic forest. Well, that doesn't even look like a yellow birch on the bowl here. B-O-L-E is what you call the part that you would cut up into furniture wood. Actually looks more like a black birch, but it's not. It's just when the trees get this old, they lose that peeling appearance. And you can only see that on the upper branches, which are obvious to me, but not obvious to the camera here. So this is an old yellow birch. It's a couple feet around, but it's been around a while if it's lost all that peeling on the bottom. Well, just like people, the trees develop character with age. Of course, some people are characters from their younger years and some aren't, but a lot of people earn that and learn that as they grow. So one thing that is more obvious in these relic forests is the trees. Each one has a different story to tell. They didn't all come up at the same time. And yes, we have different sized trees in a relic forest. They're not all big. Some are younger, like this yellow birch right here. And some are a little older. There's a large variety in the size and shapes of the trees. If you get in an area that went back to forest quickly from farmland or logging, the trees all kind of look the same. It's a little boring when you're hiking through it, but you get in these relic forests, every tree is a little different. There's different sizes, there's different shapes. And as I just mentioned, the species that you find at this location in the Catskill Mountains also is helpful in determining whether this is a relic forest. Let's just enjoy the feel of this hike. You got all kinds of yellow birch back here and all kinds of boulders, and just look at that view of the forest. It just has a more unique feel, and every little tree and every little corner of this woods looks a little different than the ones next to it. And you got your fully developed understory, and you got your fully developed canopy as well. Now, of course, you can get blowdowns and windstorm damage where those trees that are not common to these relic forests can find their way in. It's not that far to the seed source. So it's not impossible to find the oaks and the ashes in here. But most of this is trees that you would expect to find in a forest that hasn't lost its canopy or lost its touch or feel in hundreds of years. Boy, and those last few trees certainly had some unique appearance. The yellow birch that had probably grown on a log, and then the log rotted away. And then the yellow birch with the fork in the middle, and the one next to it was spiraled but dead. And a lot of trees can get that spiraled appearance. I'm not sure what kind of tree that was. Here's another yellow birch growing right on the edge of this cliff. There's about a 40-foot thick layer of cap rock here. So again, the older the forest, the more time these trees have to develop character. This is thin soil up here. This yellow birch could probably never reach the size of the ones down below because there's not much nutrients available when the soil's this thin. Let's get a little reward for our effort. Going up that steep section, that was a little bit of work. There aren't a lot of switchbacks in these mountains. When they go up, they go up. And that makes it even tougher on the downhill, in my opinion. So the top of this bedrock ledge, I'm not sure if the Department of Environmental Conservation cleared this for the view or not. I have a feeling they probably did. Because when you're in a relic forest, the treetops are usually 60, 80, 90 feet high. And this bedrock ledge is only 40 feet thick. So unless there was a natural blowdown right where this ledge was, it's possible they could have cleared this to provide this spectacular view of Little Pond and the campground below it. And the mountains in the background, which are actually just as high as this mountain. And as you go more northeast in the Catskills, there's more of that relic forest and some that's actually of balsam fir and red spruce when you get up higher and further east. And that was an interesting little half-acre of land there with almost all black cherry on the flat part of Cabot Mountain. We're on top now, and we just left the overlook and we're heading west for just a few more minutes. My time is limited. I'm going to need to turn around shortly. But that was interesting. There's a lot of sun coming through that area, but I didn't see any species that you would normally find in a real sunny opening that was man-made. So even though it was quite bright and open to sunlight, there wasn't any gray birch or ash coming in. It's still plenty of that black cherry. So again, this is a relic forest where, you know, these trees are going to be the ones that grow here regardless of how much light is coming through, as long as the area doesn't get completely cleared out by a huge windstorm. Meanwhile, let's find some more of these trees with character. Man, it's interesting up here. Just, you know, it gets a different feel. That's all I can say. A lot of these trees aren't that big, but they've all had a chance to develop their own unique shapes. There's an American beech tree here, and it's just, oh, it's been twisted, it's been turned around, the snow has snapped it, and it kept on going. And when a tree's been around a long time and still alive, it can get all these battle scars from dealing with the elements. And more black cherry and more yellow birch, and just having hiked through these forests quite a bit over the years, it's just a different feel than the forests that are not relic forest. And every elevation creates a different climax community. If you get down lower and you're fortunate enough to find these forests, it would have different species. And if you get up higher, the same thing. But for this western half of the Catskills, this is often what you find, and there's a lot of this relic forest along this trail. This is part of the Finger Lakes Trail that runs all along this ridgetop, just east of the Papacton Reservoir. So come out and enjoy these relic forests. They're quite common in this area. And I'm going to put the wraps on today's study at the point now where I'm going to be running out of daylight. I'm going to have to make my U-turn. Even though this is such a neat area, I would like to stay a little bit longer.